Hello everyone, the Mistress here with a short story. Asylum, written by Cheetown12076. I haven't seen a clock or the outside for a while, so I can't be certain. But I believe it's day 17 of my forced incarceration. Constant screams and demonic laughter echo through the hallways of this hellhole. The shock therapy torture has increased each day, and they've even begun experimenting with lobotomy surgery with horrific results. Asylum patients are seen as subhuman to many. Once dropped off here, it's like entering a portal to another world. Family doesn't visit, and the state leaves full control of the facility to the doctors, nurses, and guards. That means as this torture is ratcheted up, nobody from the outside world is coming to stop it. Nobody knows or even cares what's happening behind these walls. Food rations have been put into place for the sheer purpose of inflicting suffering. They force medication into us, oftentimes on an empty stomach, which creates awful nausea and discomfort. They prance around the facility in matching white uniforms, bestowing the phony title of doctors and nurses upon themselves. But in reality, they're just an organized mob. I've been observing the behavior at night, and what I've seen is bone-chilling. Increasingly, people have been forcefully removed from their rooms and not returned. The last few days I've been marched into the cafeteria area. I've been overwhelmed by a repugnant odor. I tell myself that I'm crazy and it can't be what I think it is. My mind races with inhuman thoughts, but I'm starving. So I eat the chunky meat soup as served and don't dare question what it is. I've only remained alive because of my obedience. The beatings have become increasingly violent, and they've begun raiding rooms without notice for contraband. Paranoia has set in, and they believe that we're planning a revolt. Discovery of this note is a certain death sentence, so I must hide it away now. I pray order can be restored, but if not, I leave this as evidence of the horrible conditions and atrocities that have been committed under this roof. God save us all. Signed by Dr. Williams, Day 17 of Inmates Running Asylum. Have a good night, everyone. Love, the Mistress.
In the basement. I'm pretty sure our basement is haunted or something. Actually, I know it is haunted. My family and I moved into this house about a month ago. The rent was cheap, and we really weren't in a position to say no or to be too picky. The price of housing has jumped considerably in the local area. It is a 4-bedroom place in the not-so-great part of town. It has a basement, a shitty attic, and the owners lived overseas. They left everything to the rental company. It seemed like they didn't want anything to do with the house itself, but for some reason they couldn't part with it. At least, that's what it sounded like. We thought it was fantastic. There is nothing worse than a nosy landlord. My parents would take the master bedroom. My grandparents would take the second largest. and my 2 siblings took the other bedrooms. I got the basement, and I was excited for it at first. It was huge, and I would have it all to myself. I was beginning to unpack when I heard a bump. I stopped and looked around. Nothing. I figured it was one of my siblings playing some kind of prank on me. I rolled my eyes, smiled to myself, and began to place my books on the bookshelf. My phone rang. I got up and looked at the number. Private number. So I ignored it, dropped it back on the bed, and turned around. Pick up. Pick up. Pick up. I thought I heard someone talking. Dana? I asked in hopes of hearing my sister's voice. I saw a shadow in the corner of the room. Child size. About her height. There was no one else it could have been. I sighed irritably. Dana, you're getting too old to play those games. I need to get unpacked. Why don't you come and help me? She didn't say anything. My normally incredibly chatty sister was silent. It was extremely strange. Dana, stop being a weirdo and get away from the corner. No one has time for this bullshit. I'm not in the corner. Dana's voice called out from the bottom of the stairs. Her green eyes wide in confusion, a glass of orange juice in either of her hands. If she was here, then who was in the corner? I looked back towards the corner and the shadow was gone. Maybe it was my imagination playing tricks on me. I smiled at Dana and gestured with her hand for her to come and sit with me. I happily accepted the juice and sipped the liquid. Still, I could have sworn that I saw something. But maybe it was because the house was new and I was still getting used to it. We sat on the bed and chatted about a few things before the topic came back to the house. What do you think of the house? She fidgeted on the spot. I like it. This room is really creepy though. Are you sure you're gonna sleep in here? In all honesty, after the shadow person in the corner, I didn't want to. Not that I was going to tell her that. Yeah, it's a nice room. Look at how big it is. Was all she said. Normally she hung around a lot, but now it was strange for her. There were so many times when I had to tell her to leave me alone to give me some space. It was as though she didn't want to be here. She went up the stairs and I was left alone in the room. The basement door was closed. And I felt so alone down here. And normally, I like being alone. This was a completely different feeling. The day had turned to night. I had a nagging feeling that I was being watched. I also didn't want to leave my room. I had a weird dream, a nightmare. I can't remember it. Every night I become more and more tired. I didn't want to leave my bed. I stopped spending time with my family and friends. In about a month, I stopped doing everything that I normally love. I stopped socializing, and I would get so angry if anyone disturbed me. I didn't want to go out. I needed to get some water and walked up the stairs. My hand tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I struck the door several times to get whoever locked the door to let me out. I kept hitting it. It wouldn't budge. I felt a shiver run up my spine. Someone was standing behind me. I turned to look, and a small child stood behind me. It looked nearly identical to my sister. She was so still, expressionless. The room was so cold. I shook my head and fiddled with the doorknob again. Stay forever, it whispered to me. Stay. You're mine. Stay with me. I kept hitting the door. Where the hell was everybody? The door opened. My mum looked at me confused and asked why I'd been banging on the door. I told her there was a ghost down there, a little girl, and that I didn't want to go down there again. She scoffed and rolled her eyes. My family never really believed in anything paranormal like this, and neither did I until it happened to me. I eventually moved out of the basement. I missed having my own personal space and all that extra room. And now, I share a room with my little sister, and while she annoys me, I have more energy again, and I'm happier and socializing once more. I'm happy I don't spend all that time with the creepy little ghost. Every so often, when I'm sent down there to get something from the basement, I swear I can see the shadows move. And I can always hear, stay with me. Fortunately, I think she's trapped in the basement. Why do basements always contain such really weird things?
It didn't take me long to realize that something was amiss. Usually, nobody would suspect me, the quiet little bookworm, of having so many creepy little, though I regret to call them this, fetishes. It wasn't as if I didn't know such things were wrong. It's just that I didn't think any harm could be done if I just thought about them and didn't act. Only one part of the whole thing began to worry me. I used to separate what I do to soothe my hormones and what I did to soothe my mind separately. Then I found myself disgusted when I noticed what the combination of both did to me. It scared me, and eventually, that fear grew into excitement. Soon, this became my little piece of paradise. I knew it was sick, but letting my imagination roam was completely harmless, right? I remember just falling back on my bed behind a locked door and letting my hands slip between my legs, finding a fulfilling satisfaction as I closed my eyes and let my fingers tease around my wet panties. This wasn't too different from what I had done as a teenager, but, however, what was on my mind was quite different. I used to think about boys I wanted to lure into my bedroom, but was always too shy to. I even had the occasional fantasy of women I admired. Not that I'd ever tell them about it, but this was different. My imagination transformed my room into a dusty and dark place with blood-stained sheets. In fact, the coppery scent of blood overtook my senses for a moment, only to cause me to snap back to reality. When I opened my eyes, the smell was gone. I always did have a powerful imagination. This continued for a few months. Every time, the thoughts got more and more vivid. Once I was past finding something disturbing, I would embrace it, and it would become a new nasty little thing that I could get off on. I only shook myself from one thought that kept returning. I kept mutilating my lover. I remember in that repeating thought, I had his wrists and ankles tied to the bedposts. It was just a normal daydream of an adult romp. That is, until I started stabbing him in non-vital areas of the body. I usually snapped out of it at that point, yet that sick little part of me wouldn't let it go. I carved my name into his chest as he screamed in pain, his cries muffled by nothing other than my left hand. Though he struggled and flailed, I only stayed where I was. I carved my name into his chest as he screamed in pain, his cries muffled by nothing more than my left hand. Though he struggled and flailed, I only stayed where I was. No amount of what he could do while bound would buck me off. I admired my work, removing my left hand from his mouth. Of course, he began to accuse me of being a
crazy bitch.
I refused to hear it all. I grabbed a pillow and held it over his face until his body quit thrashing. He had lost consciousness. I tossed the pillow aside and looked down on him. He looked like he was sleeping. He looked so peaceful. Normally, something like that would warm my heart. There was something wrong. He wasn't smiling. I drew my knife across his mouth, carving a smile into his face. He woke just as I was finishing, screaming and thrashing all over again. Oh, I wanted to look at him. I wanted to see that pretty smile. I wanted to see my name and the way it marred his perfect white skin. But he wouldn't let that happen. I kissed his bloody mouth, and the last thing it did was soothe him like it used to. He cried, and I licked away his tears. The tears and the blood mixing only made my heart race. It was like I was in love for the first time. I opened my eyes this time. I opened them, and then I saw that it wasn't my imagination anymore. I pulled my mouth from his and stared down at him. Tears continued to streak his cheeks, and the fresh wounds I had let on his face were still bleeding. My heart was throbbing in my chest, and I drew my hands up to my face to gasp in shock. It wasn't my imagination. What about all those other things I dreamed up? Had I done those too? I stared down into those accusing eyes. I could hear him trying to say something, but he was too hoarse from his screams to even speak. For some reason, I felt no regret. I knew I should, but I didn't. A grin began to creep over my face. I felt the corners of my lips being tugged at, even though I knew this was no time to be smiling. Still half naked, I leaned over him, only to whisper sweetly, "Baby, you've made me so happy." Afterwards, I curled my arms around him to sleep. I don't know what made me do that. I don't know if I really cared at the time or if I was happy with what I turned him into. He was mine now. Even if he got away from me somehow, I don't think anyone would want him now. We had broken up a few times previously, and I knew that he had seen other women, but who would want him now? I'd still want him. I kept him tied down, and I kept feeding him and giving him water. He refused the first few times, but eventually, he just let it happen. He caved to my will. I told him what a good boy he was, and he only sobbed and kept repeating one phrase.
Why, Cassie? Why?
Soon, his friends had realized they hadn't seen him. They must have known something had happened. When they arrived, they realized how weird I was acting. They shoved past me, only to find him in the state I'd left him in. I knew that I was officially fucked. That's how I got where I am now. I'm in a mental institution. I never heard from Jason again, but now I have other focuses. I close my eyes and my fantasies come to life. I'm actually quite happy this way. I only regret one thing. I wish I could taste the combination of blood and tears again.